What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy, that's Joe, and this is the Race Day Rundown.
We're at Texas Motor Speedway this week. I'm excited for it. Hometown track for us. We'll be there. But beforehand, I wanted to let you know to get in on the action. Our free DraftKings contest. If you want to get in on that action, drop your DraftKings tag below. You'll be on the invite list for the weeks coming up. Only a few more weeks to go. We can unpack what's going on here. You want to take it from here?
Well, this is the first of the third round of 8 here. 8 drivers left in the playoffs. We have 7 of them represented right here on the table. The only one who we didn't have room for was Logano. That doesn't mean that we don't think that he doesn't still have a chance to make it there. We can get into that a little bit later. But this is going to be a fun race. We just saw Xfinity. They had like 57 cautions, I believe, and a non-playoff driver win that race. I think there's some opportunity for some non-playoff drivers to maybe win this race. But there's obviously a big favorite who also has a really good shot to win this one. We'll get into that. But you're right. There's quite a bit to unpack because that last race was so crazy. But let's set the stage for this Texas event because we don't have a lot of time. We want to get you guys kind of in and out. This is going to be a fairly long race, but thankfully this time around, unlike last year, which I also was at the fall race, 0% chance of rain currently. 75 degrees, sunny. It's going to be an absolutely beautiful day. So if you happen to be near the track, don't have plans already, head on out there. We'll be there. Let's get into this breakdown because it is a long race. There are 501 miles at this event. That's 334 laps. It is a mile and a half. There used to be so many mile and a halves. We don't have that many this year. We've only had, I believe, 7 so far this year. So this is only going to be the 8th mile and a half that we've been to. Quite a few performance points are up for grabs. 233.8. Long stages, 105, 105, and 124 for that last stage. The All-Star race was here at Texas, and Kyle Larson won that. That was a very gimmicky race, but I happened to be there as well, and it was fun. It really was. Other than the heat on that particular day, it was a lot of fun. Slightly different package. So I don't know how much you were factoring into it. I'm not factoring too much of the All-Star results into this one. They had like 40 less horsepower. So the last real race we had here, Kyle Busch won. That was the crazy 3-day long rain race. Don't need to rehash bad memories because that was not a fun race to go to. What are your kind of opening thoughts on this race? I mean, we do have a lot of laps here. I know we want to kind of set the stage for strategy because I think we're going to have a little bit of a different strategy than what we've had obviously last week with quite a few more laps. Where do you want to take this, Joe?
I think we can start with talking about Kevin Harvick. He is in a position because of last week at the Roval where he missed being in the playoff mix and furthering his opportunity at a championship. So with him wrecking out and finishing where he did, he's now starting 24th, and he's going to have an impact on this race. I feel very strongly in that. And I gave Kevin Harvick a 9.5 because we're doing this on a 1 to 10 scale. He's going to have a big impact on this race. We'll get into all the drivers and how they perform, but setting up this race and why these drivers are here, Elliott and Harvick last week got into that mix and the tangle up. We'll see if they've resolved their issue, which could even further the impact on this race. It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm going to be at a 9 on Kevin Harvick. He really has been dialed in here at Texas, especially in the fall. I was able to go to a race a couple years ago. I think it was 2018, and him and Blaney basically were the class of the field, and that was obviously a playoff race. He punched his way into the championship 4 by winning this race here. In that year, he has 4 top 5s in the last 6 races here. And that's kind of overall. That's not just single out the fall races. He's got the best average finish of 5.5. I mean, everything points to Kevin Harvick being one of the best plays on the slate. I'm at a 9 versus you because there's no more Stewart-Haas cars in the playoffs. Obviously, Harvick got eliminated kind of by his own doing. I mean, he plowed and completely dumped Chase Elliott. And then when Chase Elliott finally somehow managed to get close to him again, he just drove it straight into the wall. I mean, he took himself out of that race. So with this being the last year of this car, there's really nothing to learn from this car, I think, going into next year. My biggest concern with kind of all the Stewart-Haas cars at this point, with only 4 races to go, is how competitive are they going to be really? So for me, I'm going to dial back my score just a little bit and say, like, if he were to still get like a top 10, top 12, the team might be okay with that, but that's going to make it a little harder to pay off what you're going to need in your lineups. But that's not expensive at all for him, and the fact that he's got a tremendous PD upside, you certainly have to factor that in there. I will reluctantly have to have exposure to Kevin Harvick just because of that upside. Personally, for me, I don't think we see anything else between Chase Elliott and Harvick this year. The only 2 scenarios I see is if Harvick really is still pissed and he decides to dump him, Chase that is, at Martinsville to keep him out if he's not already locked in. I don't think he would, but that would cause a lot of uproar. And then the only way I think that we see it play out anymore this year is if Chase Elliott is not in the championship 4 at Phoenix and then they happen to be around each other, then they may settle it. I think it was Phoenix a couple years ago where Chase Elliott got Denny Hamlin back from the Martinsville incident, I think like a race or 2 before. So he could definitely do it, but I think for the time being, I think this is on the back burner. But I think that's something to consider too as you build your lineups. If you think that they're going to get after it, maybe you don't have as much exposure to them.
Yeah, and I think it's something we'll see them be professional right now. They just got a talking to. I really want to see this rivalry continue. We'll probably see it if any of those scenarios that you just laid out actually happen to play out. But I really do think right now Kevin Harvick's fine. I think he has all the upside in the world, but I don't know if we see the retaliation in this race. I think it's highly unlikely.
Well, and so it's such a fast track too. I mean, we're at 1.5 miles. That's why I say if we see something, it wouldn't be until Martinsville or Phoenix, because Kansas and Texas. I mean, if you try to take someone out at one of these things, you're risking some serious potential injury to that driver. That would be a terrible, terrible look. And if he does something at Texas, Harvick that is, NASCAR's got to park him.
Yeah, they're too much of a professional, in my opinion, to make that happen. I think talking about that would be a whole different can of worms.
Right. Now, here I think is where we get to, in my opinion, the toughest decision on the board. And it's Kyle Larson at 10-5. He starts first. I'd mentioned he was really good during the All-Star race. He won that. He has been one of the best on 1.5 miles this year. He's the only driver who has more than 1 win on 1.5 miles. He's got 5 top 10s out of 7 races. There is a guy who I could make an argument has slightly better stats other than the driver rating /win categories. We'll get to that driver in just a minute. But I think you have a real critical decision to make when it comes to Kyle Larson. And I think a lot of it has to come down to, are you playing 1 to 2 lineups, or are you going to play a lot of lineups? And I think whether you're playing 1 or 2-ish or a lot, I think your decision needs to be either completely fade Larson or 100% Larson. Because Larson should be the highest owned driver, close to it. I don't think he's going to be under-owned by any means. And if you're in a big tournament like the main $15 150 max tournament, there's going to be so many different combos that you're going to need as much exposure to these different drivers down below. Or you can take the approach and say, hey, maybe there's another driver out there who actually performs a little bit better than Larson, and I'm going to try to be overexposed on them and hit all those other combination of drivers. And if that happens, I mean, I think you're way less likely to split the winnings with anyone, because I think Larson's just going to be so high owned. That being said, I'm still going to give Kyle Larson a 10, because I could easily see him leading 150, 200 laps in this race. And if he does that, you have to have him.
Yeah, sound like you were coming around to my contrarian narrative, and then you give him a 10 because he's pretty much a lock. I understand where you're coming from. I've given him a 9 because I think he has all the upside in the world, just like you described. But there's another driver we'll get to. I think I like a little bit more, a little bit of upside, in my opinion, maybe. So we'll talk about.
I'm planning on stacking them.
Yeah,
that's kind of my approach.
That's going to be fun.
But if the scenario I laid out, I'm going more heavy on Larson. That's more my strategy. But if you want to try to counteract me, that's where you say I'm going to risk it and fade Larson completely.
Yeah, there's a multitude of ways to do it this week. There's a lot of value to be had, I think, in pretty much every category we go over. This is the fun part right here, talking about these guys at the top. I think Martin Truex Jr., 10-3, starting 8th, is somebody I don't really want to have exposure to because he falls in a really awkward range, and this isn't where their strong suit is in these playoffs. So I'm really thinking that the 550 package, we've seen it throughout the season, really isn't their strong suit. So I've landed on a 7 for Martin Truex Jr. on this race.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to end up with any Martin given that price. You know, he hasn't been completely terrible on mile and a halves. His average finish is 8.6. Out of 7 races, he has 3 top 5s. That's not terrible. 7th best driver rating out of everybody. But I'm going to be at a 6.5 just because I don't see him. He has to get out front and lead laps or get those fastest laps. And with Larson, Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Blaney, Byron, all those guys, I think those are going to be the slightly faster cars. And I agree. 550 has not been the best package for Truex. I don't think I'm going to end up playing Truex until Martinsville. That's when I might actually see him, working out. So for me, Truex is a 6.5. The next guy on the list, Chase Elliott, he's 10,100. He starts 6th. I'll be at a 7.5. Texas has been a bit of a struggle for Chase. Not his best mile and a half. But I think a really good marker of a track to kind of for mile and a halves is Charlotte. I think that's kind of a good benchmark. I think you can learn a lot from how drivers perform at Charlotte versus some of these other mile and a halves that we go to that are slightly different. And he was the second best car there. Larson obviously dominated, but he was the only other guy who really got up there and led any laps. It was pretty much just those two. So there is some upside there for Chase Elliott, but I think there's a couple other guys I'd rather have. So I don't know if I'm actually going to end up with any Chase this week other than maybe a few singles or maybe some prize pick action or something like that. But I think for DraftKings, I think it's a little too expensive to want to play Chase. Are you going to have more interest than I am?
I've given him an 8 because I think I want to have some exposure to him because he does have 3 top 5s in the 7.5-mile tracks, and he does have an ability to have fastest laps in this type of setting. So I think he could have a decent performance points day. So he could kind of edge out some of these drivers that might have a little bit more ownership. So I think he's a GPP play, not really a cash game setting play for me. Denny Hamlin is an interesting guy to talk about. He's the first driver under $10,000. He's coming in at $9,900 starting second. I've given him an impact score of 8 because I think he's kind of on the edge of being able to completely dominate this race and really run away with it, but at the same time, I really don't know if I think Larson's the better bet. And then even with that, there's a driver, his teammate below him, Kyle Busch, I think we'll talk about here in a second, that has better numbers throughout the season and has a little bit more upside with the position to gain.
We'll get to your guy in just a minute. Calm down. I know you're salivating. Just take a second here. We got to get through his.
Yeah, I know. We're finally getting to the crunch time, and he's actually on the championship cusp.
Speaking on the championship cusp, though, Denny Hamlin has really stepped up during the playoffs. He's been, we've mentioned this throughout the year. He has been one of the most consistent drivers, but until the playoffs, he hadn't got that win. So he was looked on as less than some of these other drivers who he had more points than. He won the last time we were at a mile and a half, Las Vegas, albeit some bad pit strategies by the complete Team Hendrick organization. They screwed themselves. If they don't make that mistake, I think we do see a nice battle between Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson. They both looked really fast. Chase Elliott was also really fast. We may have saw a nice Hamlin versus Hendrick Motorsports at the end of that race. I think we could get it this week, but you're right. I'm a little torn between Hamlin and Kyle Busch, because here Kyle Busch's stats are way better than Hamlin's. Hamlin does have a win in the last 6, but only 2 top 10s out of those 6 races. An average finish of 20.3. Fastest laps about 10, 11 laps led on average. 11th overall for driver rating. This has not been the best mile and a half for Denny Hamlin by any means, but they're clicking right now. Sometimes the best strategy when you are building these lineups is play the best damn drivers. And that would be this year. That's Larson, that's Hamlin. Play those guys. Those guys have been solid. Risk it. But I can definitely make the counter argument for not playing Hamlin because of some of his shaky results here. Personally, I think he'll still have a pretty good run. I'll be at an 8.5 on Hamlin. And now we get to your guy. Go ahead.
Kyle Busch, 9,800, starting third. I've given him the 10 on my impact score. I don't give them lightly. I think this is the race where we really see him make that push for a championship. I made him my preseason pick, and I've kind of followed through. Kind of see where he lands, and these races are kind of where I've found the opportunity to really feel strongly that he might take that step to a championship. And we see this mile and a half. He's got great numbers this season, better so than Kyle Busch in some, where he's got 6 top 5s in 7 races. He's the most consistent out of anyone in this setting this year. He's got a lot of good performance points data as well. You want that from this DraftKings angle, and I've given him a 10 because he's at a discount compared to the guys we just got done talking about, and he has all the upside in the world, being able to get out front potentially early and dominate. I really like Kyle Busch this week. I think a lot of people are going to be all over him as well. I can play him in cash and in GPP and build a couple dominator situation with him at that price tag because he is a little bit discount to those guys above him.
Right, yeah, he doesn't have to do quite as much to really pay off that salary. He's also the only driver who has not finished outside the top 10 on mile and a half this year, and the best average finish of 3.9. I think the next best looks like Denny Hamlin, who's at 7.4. That's a pretty big difference over 7 races.
Consistency.
He's just been lights out. But the big difference is driver rating. Kyle Larson, 126.8 versus Kyle Busch's 110.2.
Both strong.
They're both strong, but that's over 16, basically 16 and a half points. That's huge when you're talking about driver rating. Both are solid. Like I said earlier, I plan on playing a few lineups with both of them together. I think those are the most likely two dominators. But obviously you have to throw Hamlin in there as well. But when it does come to Kyle Busch, I'm going to give him a 9. I do really like him. Like I said, I plan on playing him. I didn't go any higher just because there's not as much PD upside. So if he gets into a little bit of trouble, if he doesn't show up and is not as fast as those Hendrick cars, he's going to lose the opportunity to get those fastest laps. If Larson just completely runs away with it, he's not getting those laps led. So I'm going to get a little bit more cautious. But with your score, my score, and then Larson's, I mean, we have them both rated together combined at 9.5, and that's the way I think it should be. I think these are the two main guys going into this race that you have to look at as being the most likely to really just dominate this race. So 9 on Kyle Busch for me. Someone I have heard a lot of people talk about this week that really like this driver. I see you really like him as well. I'm planning on being maybe a little bit cautious, but that's William Byron. 9,600, he starts 12th. So close to making this round. Had he made this round, I think he had a legitimate shot to make the championship 4 because he's pretty good on mile and a halves. He really is. He got his only win this year on a mile and a half. High tire wear versus low tire wear. So there's a little difference there. I'm at an 8.5 on William Byron. I think that he's a solid play here. But 9,600, if you're planning on doing maybe a Harvick, Larson, Busch lineup, there's really no way to fit Byron in there. So I think it almost comes down to, if you're planning on playing a two-main dominator with like a Larson, Kyle Busch, you almost have to decide between Harvick and Byron as your sort of your PD plays to match it, in my opinion. PD / just total points. I don't know if you can get all four of those guys in there. So that's why I'm not quite as high on William Byron. I would rather pay up and go a little bit more with the PD upside that Harvick has.
Well, I like William Byron in my kind of setup because I've given him a 9.5, and I think because he is so fast on 1.5 miles and all of his performance points with fastest laps and average laps led, he can be that second dominator at a discount and place differential. So you stack him with a Larson or I would imagine just going Kyle Busch and him together, and then you have all these other guys we're getting ready to talk about that are really there's a lot of value to be had. So I'm saying if you pair him with a Kyle Busch or a Kyle Larson, you can really do some damage. And I think having him at a 9.5, I like him a lot because, like you just said, he's really performed strongly in the 1.5 mile setting. I don't see any reason why he can't continue these strong runs. He's looked strong, and he's just kind of had accidents happen at certain points throughout the race that he hasn't got some of these strong finishes that we've seen him be able to have really strong runs and performances, and just not getting the finishes he needs.
So for me personally, if I'm choosing between Byron and the next guy, that being Ryan Blaney at 9,500 starting fourth, I obviously like the PD upside that Byron offers. I have them both rated at an 8.5, but I think I would personally rather go with Blaney. The reason being, and it's close. It all kind of depends on how you think this race is going to shape out. William Byron is the 10th rated driver on driver rating. His average finish here at Texas is 16.5. He has 2 top 10s, 0 top 5s. In those same six races, Ryan Blaney average finish of 10.5. 0 wins, but 3 top 5s and 5 top 10s. This has been a very good track for Ryan Blaney. We also saw him be very good at Atlanta, where he got a win. Again, high tire wear versus low tire wear. I get that you don't get the PD upside with Blaney that you get with Byron, but I think Blaney's another guy who literally can get fastest laps and get out front and lead laps. A lot will just depend on how fast Larson is. If Larson might just run away with this thing. But I think Blaney is a guy that has to be considered because they've been really good. I mean, we saw him. I know it's a 2-mile track, but Michigan with the tire wear is kind of similar to Texas, and he won that one kind of late too over William Byron. So it's a tough play between both these guys because they're not exactly cheap, and we do kind of expect this to be a 1 to 2 dominator type of race, so it makes it a little tougher to play these guys. That's kind of where I'm at with these. I think they're both playable. It is tough, but I think I lean a little bit more Blaney, which is a little crazy based on how we've been rating him this year. I kind of almost thought we'd be a little bit different than that.
Yeah, I see Ryan Blaney at I've given him an 8 because I think just that place differential, and we've seen this consistent speed of Blaney. I think it just is that extra nudge I needed to give him a full 1.5 advantage, in my opinion. I really lean that way strongly. I think somebody that is really hit or miss in this range could be a wild card and always seems to be the wild card. Alex Bowman, 9,300 starting 14th. I've given him a 7.5 because I want to have him in some GPP tournament plays, not in a cash game setting, but he's always seems to find himself in this position where he has upside, but always finds himself starting in the same position, and we continue to figure out he's not always hitting value. He's always starting in that same position, but he's enticing. Every once in a while, he's that extra little element you really need to cash some big lineups, but I don't know if it's this week.
Yeah, I'm at a 7.5 on Alex Bowman. I see it. I see the upside there, but you're right. He's probably one of the hardest drivers to try to predict. A lot of times the results might not match up with our predictions on drivers, but if you watch the race, generally speaking, you'll see us or see the drivers that we're high on perform well, but then something happens, a penalty or someone else getting into them or a flat tire or something crazy that, is a huge element of the sport, but you can't really accurately predict. It seems like when Bowman should do well, he doesn't. And when you're not really expecting him to do good, that's when he kind of surprises you. So 7.5 for Bowman. I can see the upside. I don't know if I'm going to end up there. That 14th place starting position, I mean, he's got to get kind of top 8, I think, to really pay that off, which he could. But I don't know. I think I'd rather put my money elsewhere on Alex Bowman. Another guy that I think I'm going to have a hard time a hard time with is Logano. He starts 5th. He's $9,100. I'm at a 7 on old Joey. 550 tracks and mile and a halves in particular. He's good in his career, but this year has just, it's like, I don't know, it's like they're bringing a road course car or something, because they've just been way off the pace compared to everyone, almost every single race.
Yeah, it's something that we're not accustomed to seeing, but this year we have a lot of data, 7 races of it. I've given him an impact score of 6 because it's not strong. He has only one top 10 in those 7 races. Even the fastest laps, all that stuff's not there. We haven't seen the performance. That's why I've gone a 6. I just think there's other value to be had throughout this field.
Yeah, a guy that looks to have a high upside is Ross Chastain. He's next on the board. He's 8,900. He starts 25th. I'm at a 7 because there is that PD upside there. We saw his teammate Kurt Busch win Atlanta, but kind of the same situation. Neither one of those guys are going to be in the playoffs or are in the playoffs. It's the last year of this car and of that team. Maybe they try to go all out and get a win, or maybe they just kind of phone it in and try to collect their check. But when you kind of look at Ross Chastain's stats at mile and a half, they're not that favorable. He's been way better at the 750 tracks, especially road course type tracks, short tracks, whatnot. That's where he's really excelled in this car. So for Chastain, I'm at a 7, and his teammate Kurt Busch, who's right below him at 8,700, starting 17th, I will give him an 8 because he has been much better at mile and a halves. I think I might end up with some Kurt Busch. I don't think I'm going to end up with any Chastain.
Yeah, I've given Chastain a 5. Pretty much you summed it up, but I think the stats are just way worse than I was expecting. So yeah. It looks enticing. So I think Kurt Busch is really where I'll land more. I've given him an impact score of 8.5. I think he has some solid upside. We've seen him perform strongly in this package at times, and he has top 10 upside. So there is an ability to fit him in the right setting, and I think that is in tournaments. I don't think he's a cash game play, but he's somebody that has some strong upside starting 17th.
Someone who doesn't have, in my opinion, a bunch of upside, but he is sneaky, is Brad Keselowski. He's 8,500. He starts 7th. I'm at a 7.5 on Brad. When you look at the mile and a half stats this year, not really too bad. He's a 6th rated driver according to driver rating. Average finish of 11th, including 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s. He's got some performance points as well. But his results at Texas in the last 6, over those last 6 races, have just not been very good. Average finish of 22.5 and 0 top 5s and only 2 top 10s. It's risky to play Brad this week. I think he'll be fairly low owned, and obviously he needs to perform well. You can definitely make it work. I don't think I'm going to end up there, but I don't know yet because I think he is a nice kind of contrarian play. I don't know. What do you kind of think we're going to see with Brad?
Yeah, I landed on a 7 with my impact score because I think he is in that kind of no man's land, and there is ability for him to have a strong performance. We've seen him be able to perform well in mile and a half over his career, and in this year we've seen him have strong runs. But overall at Texas, it hasn't been awfully favorable. I think he's a great tournament play. I think he's somebody that you could look to, but somebody I really want to look at a little bit closer is Eric Almirola, 8,100, starting 22nd. I think he's finds himself in a great position. He's really strong at 1.5 miles, and he's one of those drivers that at certain tracks he performs really strong. And I think Texas is really one of those tracks. We can look at the data throughout here. Like I said, 1.5 miles has been a little bit more up his alley this year. I've given him an impact score of 8.
I'm going to be at a 7, and the reason why I'm not quite as high, because you're right. We talked about this when we were doing our projections. I mean, he's a few tracks he pops at, and this is kind of one of those tracks that he does pop at a little bit. But to really pay off that salary, he's got to get inside the top 15. He really needs like a 13th, 12th place finish or better to really pay off that salary. He has the ability to do it. My concern is going to be kind of what I've already said about Kevin Harvick is, what do we really see out of the Stewart-Haas team? We know all these guys are coming back next year. We're getting a new car. What are they really going to show up with? I would expect, the Chastain and Kurt Busch, the Chip Ganassi team, to put a little bit more effort in, considering they are closing up shop at the end of the year. They want to try to go out with a bang. What does Stewart-Haas really have to gain from these last 4 races? So if that happens to be the case, maybe we don't see that speed that we normally see out of these guys, and for Almirola to pay off that salary. So a 7 for me, I can see it working out, and we are kind of, once we kind of get in these range down here, there's really not too many drivers where you're like, oh, this is an obvious PD upside play, value play. We don't get a lot of that with really anybody else, in my opinion, as far as being, starting further back. So Almirola has to be considered, but I don't love it by any means.
Yeah, I think his teammate Chase Briscoe, 7,926, is basically ditto what we just said. I've given him an impact score of 7. I think Almirola's track history overall and not being a rookie helps. That's why I think he has a little bit of a nudge, in my opinion. But Briscoe having 4-place differential is also a great upside, and I think lends himself to a fantastic tournament play. I would like to have more exposure to him in that setting.
Yeah, I think I'm going to end up a little bit more with Briscoe if I'm coming down between the two. I'm at a 7.5 on Briscoe. He's gotten better as the year's gone on. No surprise there. He's a rookie. He doesn't get practice and qualifying. So, I mean, most of the races are like practice for him, essentially. So I think he can do fairly well here with those extra 4 spots and a slightly cheaper price tag. He's hitting a 15th place finish. He's right around 5x, so he's playable. And then we get, I think this is probably one of our favorite plays when you get out of those top tier guys like Larson and Kyle Busch. I'm all over Tyler Reddick this week. 7,700. He's starting 9th, so there's not a huge PD upside, but man, this guy's going to be going for it. Whether his team does or not, he's going for it. He was so close. He got 2nd last week. He moved, not intentionally, but he moved William Byron coming into chicane. William Byron was still in the playoffs at that time. I don't think Reddick cares about that. He wants his first win. He wants to go into next year with some incredible momentum for him and his team. I'm at a 9 on Reddick. I would be at a 9.5 or a 10 if there was a little bit more PD upside. We don't get that, so you play what you get. But I really like what we have been seeing out of Reddick these last few races.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic what we've seen. I've been at a 9 as well, and we've seen him be strong on 1.5 mile settings as well. We've seen his teammate Austin Dillon, who we're about to talk about, so we know the team is strong here as well. I think he's in a prime position to be able to pay off that price tag if he gets that top 5 finish. It's something that you are looking for. I think he's as much of a lock in a cash game setting as you'll find, so I like him this week. I think Austin Dillon, his teammate, 7,500 starting 15th. I like him maybe even a little bit more so. I've given him a 9.5. He's got more place differential, a win here, and 1.5 miles this year. This team, like we just said with Reddick, they've been really, really strong. I think this is their niche. These two could be fighting for it at the end. That'd be awesome.
It really would. And I could see both of these guys contending for like a top 5. But I think at the end of the day, I think Austin is going to be kind of around that 9th to 12th place finish, which would still be really good for him. Unless, of course, just some crazy wrecks happen late in this race, which can happen. I'm at an 8.5 on Dillon, though. Personally, like I said, I just like Reddick a little bit more, despite the extra PD upside we get with Austin Dillon. I'm just a slightly more hesitant than you are, but I certainly understand where you're coming from and why you're so highly rated on him, because he has been good here. He won here last year in the spring race, which was more like a summer race. So yeah, I like Austin Dillon. Someone who I don't like almost any week, and especially this week, is Ricky Stenhouse. He's starting 27th, and he's 7,200. When you look at that, you're like, hey, man, like, there's a lot of PD upside. We know how aggressive he can be and getting more out of that car than maybe he should. But his mile-and-a-half stats don't really support that. I mean, we've really got him pegged around a 21st place car, so there's some PD upside even there. But if he's doing that, that's less than 4x. If he's not getting any fastest laps or laps led, which we're not really seeing too much out of him this year, especially on mile-and-a-halves. So I don't think I can end up with any Ricky Stenhouse. Are you going to be playing? I'm out of 5, but are you going to end up with any?
I'm at a 4. I think this is kind of the style track. It's a wild card race in some settings. And it's like, man, it races very similar to a super speedway at points. And so you'll see him be aggressive. He might be up towards the front at times, but I find that he tends to get in situations that aren't good for him in these type of races. And that price tag is a little bit iffy for me. He does have place differential upside. Take a shot in GPP if you're going to play him. Definitely stay away in cash.
So this is one of probably the last great PD upside plays that we might get on the slate. And that's, if you've been playing much at all this year, you realize this is another guy who's been kind of a Jekyll and Hyde, like Alex Bowman. Ryan Newman, $7,000 starting 31st. If he can hit around where he's been getting with mile-and-a-halves, around 18th, he's over 5.5x. Like, that's what you need. There's, top 20 upside, but there's been a lot of inconsistencies out of that team as well. I'm at a 7. I know you're pretty high on him. He really popped when you were digging into the data. So I know you're a little bit more, I guess, higher on him than what I am, but there is a little hesitancy there just because they have been kind of all over the place. They've had some amazing runs and some just disastrous runs.
Yeah, $7,000. I've given him a 7.5. I think he's really a nice piece to have a path to value with that place differential, and we've seen him get top 25, in the top 25 times out of the 7 races in a mile-and-a-half. And if he gets to the top where he's averaging in the 18th position in this setting, he's hitting that 5x value that you would need. I think somebody that could play into this, but I want to be hesitant on and definitely would prefer him, Ryan Newman, over Eric Jones, who is 6,600 starting 21st. I've given him a 6.5, though. I think Texas seems to be one of his stronger tracks, albeit that he's had better equipment. But if Petty and them get their setup right, he could really run strong here. And in mile-and-a-halves this year, it's hit or miss with him. I don't know if we see him have a strong day, but I don't want to miss the boat, and I want some exposure in tournament settings and have a little bit of Eric Jones this weekend at Texas.
Yeah, I mean, he has, I think, an average finish at Texas of like inside the top 10. It's like 8.5 or something like that. It's solid, but I'm going to be at a coin flip right at a 5 for Eric Jones. He's not in Joe Gibbs equipment anymore. I mean, he's in Richard Petty. He has not had great runs on mile-and-a-half so far this year. You're right. If certain circumstances go his way, certain guys wreck out, if they happen to nail the setup, he could definitely pay off because he is only 6,600. But I see him more around a high teens, low 20th place finishing. And if he does that, he's not killing you, but he's not really helping you that much. But we are really kind of starved for solid plays down here. I mean, realistically, there's only like a couple more drivers even worth talking about. I think a driver that we have to mention is Chris Buescher, 6,500. He's starting 10th. Great run last week on the road course. Finished 3rd. I like him. Despite starting 10th, I like him here. He's Texas native, so this is like his home track too. I'm going to 7 on Chris Buescher. I just wish we could get a little more PD upside out of him because, I mean, That's tough.
That's what's hurting his value for me. I think giving him a 6 like I did is a little bit out there. I think GPP, he's a great play. A mile and a half. He's got four top 15s, I believe. So very, very good in this setting. 3 top 10s. I think he can get the job done. Very accustomed to this track. I think he could be a great play in GPP tournaments.
Someone who we both basically have him as a coin flip. Bubba Wallace, 6,400, starting 18th. They have just not nailed the mile and a half setup yet. It's been pretty poor overall for them. They've had better success at other style of tracks, but we still recognize as a Joe Gibbs type equipment. They got the win at Talladega a couple weeks ago, so they're probably riding a lot of momentum, wanting to finish this year out strong. So I'm at a 5. There is some value there, but I don't think I'm going to have too much interest just because I don't see a ton of upside coming from them unless things get a little crazy.
Yeah, I'm at a 5-2. I think I would play him in a GPP environment just to be able to be a little bit different. He could have some a strong performance and have a lot of value upside, being that he is starting 18th. I think Ryan Preece is somebody I would have just as equal amount of exposure to. He's $6,000 starting 23rd. I've given him a 5. I think he has just as much upside, if not more, than Bubba Wallace with a discount.
Yeah, I'm at a 4 on Preece. There's not really a lot that I like there. Not been great on mile and a halves, but hey, you never know. And again, we're kind of looking for solid plays in this range. And that brings me to the last, in my opinion, the last 2 guys that are really worth mentioning. And they seem to almost always find themselves around each other on the price side of things. That's Corey LaJoie, 5,700, starting 29th. Anthony Alfredo, starting 28th at 5,600. Honestly, I don't like playing either of these guys, but I think you're going to have to at least play one, if not 2, to hit those higher price guys. So if you got to pick one, I think I'm going to go Corey LaJoie. I'm going to give him a 6.5 just because, he's had some his average finish is just garbage on mile and a halves, but he has had some good runs at times. So if he can just keep it together, keep it clean, if he can finish around top 20-ish, that's perfect. That's all you need. I like his upside a little bit more than what we've seen out of Alfredo, where I'm at a 5 on him.
Yeah, I'm at a 5.5 on LaJoie and a 4 on Alfredo. I think LaJoie has more upside, and I lean his he's not a rookie. He has a lot more experience, and seems to me we could see a little bit more value to be had there. I think it's going 6.5 is a little strong. In my opinion, he's more a 5.5. I don't want to have a ton of exposure, but he might be that final key that unlocks the perfect GPP lineup for you. So definitely want to take a look at that. Outside of that, the drivers below him, I wouldn't really want to dabble with this week. This is going to be a fun setting, and I don't know if I want to have any of these really lower-tier drivers out there. This is going to be a fast race, a lot of action, and track position is going to be key. I am excited to get this underway. I know we missed our podcast, so we extended this a little bit more to get you some information. We apologize for not getting that podcast out to you. We typically are on crunch time trying to get everything out, but we didn't want to slack on getting you all the information you need to build successful DraftKings lineups, and that's why we're here. We also have our DraftKings content, that contest that we mentioned earlier, but also the other content that we have is our race guide. That's a great digital magazine to kind of pair with all the data and stats and information and numbers and everything we just dove into. So if you want to take that look at that link's below. It's available in our Patreon. If you liked what you saw here, definitely let us know. We'd like to have that interaction. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out, and it's lets us know we're providing relative content to you. Man, I'm excited to get this thing underway, be at the race. That's something I don't get to do all that often. I'm excited to go there with you and take in that experience. What are your thoughts headed into the action?
Yeah, technically we're already on our way as you guys are watching this, or we may already be at the track, so that's fun. Like I said, it's going to be beautiful weather. really a perfect day for a race, under the big Texas sky. I really can't wait. The only thing that would make it better is if maybe we had like garage passes or hot passes, something like that. Maybe we can see if we can talk to one of the security guards there, let us go by or something. I mean, who knows? We'll see what we can do. But no, it's going to be fun. But this is going to be an intense race because you win, and you're in the playoffs already. You're going to the championship. You know for sure you have a 1-4 shot at the title. So I think things could get a little hectic, a little crazy late in this race, which I'm hoping for because, hey, if you've been watching NASCAR at all, you know that Texas over the last few years doesn't always provide the most entertaining race. But when you throw all the playoff elements in there, a lot of the drama that we saw because of the Roval and how things shook up there. I mean, dude, we didn't even mention this, but there was a good little chunk of that race where Kyle Larson was below the cut line. Now, I know this isn't a cutoff race, but he was like a lock to win, and they almost got eliminated because of a alternator issue. Which playoff driver at Texas is going to have that issue, and will they be able to come in clutch like the 5 team did last week? If it were to be a Brad or a Joey Logano or something like that, which of these playoff drivers is really going to elevate themselves? Because this is it. Like I said, the next round is a championship. So I'm looking forward to all of that. And just get into the race, man.
Well, we'll find out and see how it ends. We're excited for it. That's Jeremy. I'm Joe, and we'll see you next time.